Yeah. Okay, we're recording.
Okay, so my name is Jody Gboney, and I am a prevention educator with Ulster Prevention Council. And today's webinar is going to be dealing with problem gambling. So I wanted to just start out showing who I am, saying hello, and then I'm going to be sharing my screen, which I've never done before, so we're going to hope that it works. Cheryl, it's looking like I can't share it.
You should have
Yeah, all right.
the option.
All right, let's see.
There you
Is it
are.
working?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. So Webster defines gambling as to stake or risk money on anything of value on the outcome of something involving chance or any matter of thing involving risk. So the point of this webinar is to increase awareness on how to recognize problem gambling and how that might impact an individual and their loved ones. There are 5 types of gamblers. First one would be a social gambler. For that person, gambling is not a problem. It's more of a social activity or recreational activity. Next would be a problem gambler, someone who is maybe starting to develop some problem behaviors associated with gambling. It might be something they think about more often. It might be starting to get in the way of other things going on in their life, other responsibilities or interests that they might have. A pathological compulsive gambler is someone who has developed more of a problem with gambling, and it's really starting to take over and cause more problems for the person. An organized crime gambler, I think most people are aware of what organized crime is. So that's sort of, it's like their way of earning an income, and it involves a legal activity. And then we have the professional gambler, which someone who gambles on a regular basis and has found a way to be good enough at it that they maybe earn an income doing it, such as a professional poker player who has found a way to earn enough money doing it so that maybe it can overcome the times when they do lose. The next thing we're going to do is watch a short video on, let's hope I can do this, on how to recognize, it's just like a quick, almost 9-minute clip showing someone who is developing some problem gambling behaviors. And hey, Cheryl, it's on a different screen because the link in the program didn't work. Do you know how to switch to a different screen?
You should be able to just cut and paste the address and put it in a new link and then share your screen.
Yeah, I was able to open that, but it's still showing the old screen, you know, the presentation. Yeah. And I needed to switch it to the screen that the video is on.
When you go to the screen share button, we'll give you the option to change applications. Where it says share your screen.
Okay. It says stop sharing. Maybe I'll stop and then do it again.
Yeah.
Then I can switch screen. Okay. Sorry about that, everyone. There's a learning curve to doing this. And of course, when I was preparing, the link worked in the presentation, so I didn't need to work. Okay, let's see.
Mom, when's Gboney coming? She'll be here in a minute, sweetheart. And there she is. Grandma coming. She'll be here any minute, sweetheart. And there she is. Hey, you. Grandma's here. Where? Okay, if you say so. Am I ready? No, you're a little early, actually. Oh, shoot. Oh, what happened to your watch? I guess I need a new one, huh? Didn't Ronnie just buy you one for your birthday? I miss you. You know that? I miss you too. Oh, you just missed my cookie. You gotta take some of that from me. See that? You are in for it tonight. Believe me, you'll be fine. Yeah. Come on, Sam. So where's Michael? He just left work. I'm meeting him over there. Yes, Dennis. Dennis, now you be good for Grandma. I will. And Daddy and I'll be back soon, okay? Okay. Okay, I love you. All right, see you, Mom. Bye.
Good, can we say hey tonight? I don't want to go back to the gameplay.
Yeah, hey, I was saving this for later, but... Oh, I love this one. Well, why don't you go in the other room and play then?
Thank you, Grandma.
You're welcome. You still here? So, what's the game, please? Huh? Oh, that? I don't know. You know kids. Yeah, I do. Where have you two been going? Nowhere. Okay. I mean, sometimes we might go for a drive. Really? Where to? I don't know. Does it matter? It matters to me, yeah. Please, keep your voice down. Somebody's going to hear you. So, it's not going to exactly be news, will it? You always get so worked up. What, over my mother taking my baby to the casino, you mean? That child never set foot in the casino. No, of course, because you locked him in the car with some DVD, didn't you? I thought he was just telling some story. Honey, it's not like you think. No? What's it like then, Mom? Please, keep your voice down. I can explain. What are you doing? I'm letting Michael know I'm going to be late. Real late. Look, I didn't really expect to be there that long. Oh my God. I just had to run in real fast. You had to run to the casino with my child? You wouldn't understand. Oh, just try me. It just helps is all. It just helps. I'm sorry, you're going to have to do way better than that, Mom. After your father died, I had a real tough time. I remember. Oh, no, you don't either. Because I never told anyone exactly how bad I really felt. Aunt Mary, though, she knew. She knew. She was the one that got me going back out. After all that time alone in that house. She invited me out with her girlfriends on one of their casino trips. Just for something to do. All we had to play with the slots. In fact, when I passed those cards out front, the ones that said to call if you had a gambling problem, I think those poor people, you know? I mean, that wasn't us. We were just there to have some fun, you know? To forget the world for a little while. And I did too. When I played those slots, I did forget all the pain missing your father. I forgot a lot of things. Problem was, once I got back home, that pain would just start right up again, come rushing right back. And after a while, I just couldn't take that, Shauna. Not when I knew there was a place I could go to forget.
But you seemed fine.
Yeah. I could see a lot of ways. I learned that trick a long time ago. I also learned to take care of my own problems and not be a burden on other people.
You started selling things so you could still gamble. And that's what happened to the watch that you got from Ronnie.
Sold a few things, yeah.
Just so you can go back and gamble?
It's like I said, it's complicated. It didn't start out like this, though. It really didn't. In the beginning, I'd win some. Then I'd lose a lot more. See? Then I felt like I had to win it all back again. Make it right. And before you know it, I'm bringing my grandbaby along for the ride. Because I just can't stay away.
It's okay, Mom. It's gonna be all right. You just need some help, is all, okay? We're gonna get it for you.
No. This is my mess. And I'm gonna clean it up myself.
Mom, this is bigger than you now, okay? And there's no way you were going to go through this alone. Not anymore. All right? Not anymore, okay? It's okay, Mom. It's okay. It's gonna be okay, I promise, okay?
I'm Joanne. We're on C.
I'm Marcia H. And I'm a compulsive gambler.
Okay. Let's switch back to, bear with me 1 minute. And hopefully my other screen is back on the screen for everyone. So as you saw in the video, the effects of problem gambling can affect all your loved ones, as well as the individual. It can affect all of their loved ones. It was obvious this woman loved her grandchild, and because gambling started to take over all of her decision making, she put her grandchild in definitely an inappropriate situation, possibly even a dangerous situation. And she also mentioned some financial impacts that it's having on her life. People are maybe less likely to recognize that they have a problem with gambling, or also to seek treatment for a problem gambling, because there's still a big stigma in our society related to problem gambling, and people feel a lot of guilt, as you could see with the woman in the video. She felt a lot of shame about it, and luckily her daughter recognized the situation and helped her get some help. Some statistics on gambling in the United States. So approximately 85% of US adults have gambled at least once in their lives. 60% of US adults have gambled in the past year. 2 million, which is 1% of US adults, are estimated to meet the criteria for pathological gambling in a given year. And another 4 to 6 million, 2 to 3%, would be considered problem gamblers. Another study that I read, men seem to be 3 times more likely to develop problem gambling behaviors than women are. And it's a big thing. Compulsive gambling adds approximately $6 billion to the economy of the United States, and which is huge. It's not just a problem in the United States, though. It's an international problem, and other countries have a pretty big issue as well. Certain segments of our population are more vulnerable to develop problem gambling. Adolescents, college students, and then, as we saw in the video, senior citizens. Adolescents are 2 to 4 times more likely to develop a problem with gambling than adults. And there are some reasons for that. So why is gambling a problem for youth? Societal influences have normalized gambling. Parents, family members, schools, and the community are not aware of the risks of youth gambling. So what might seem as something harmless could end up developing into a problem for some kids. The media is bombarding youth with pro-gambling messages and inadvertent promotion of gambling involvement by schools who host casino nights, 50-50 raffles, and by parents who put scratch-off tickets in as stocking stuffers or encourage family poker nights, etc. It's something that's sort of normalized in our society, and for most people, it will be harmless and not cause them any problems. But unfortunately, for some people, it could develop into a problem for them, and adolescents are more at risk of that becoming a problem than maybe some other segments of our population. So it's just something to be aware of. Approximately 68% of youth between the ages of 14 and 21 have gambled in the last year. 11% report having gambled twice a week or more. 2.1% of adolescents already meet the criteria for problem gambling. So you see that percentage is higher for adolescents than it is in the general population. And 6.5% of those youth are in the category of at-risk or problem gambling. Adolescent involvement, and this actually surprised me when I saw this, adolescent involvement in gambling is believed to be greater than their use of tobacco, hard liquor, and marijuana. So what makes an adolescent more at risk of developing a problem with gambling? It's the same things that make them at risk for developing problems with substance misuse as well. Adolescents are impulsive. They don't always think before they do things. Not that adults always do, but adolescents are even more unlikely to think before they act. It's part of the developmental stage that they're in. They're still figuring themselves out and learning about how the things that they do affect their life. They're very susceptible to peer influence. They're emerging egos. They're still getting to know themselves. And the attraction of winning, which obviously is part of the attraction to anyone, whether it's an adolescent or an adult, but it's particularly attractive to an adolescent. Their belief that nothing negative can happen to them. So adolescents tend to think that they're invincible and think that they can take risks and do risky things, and they'll believe that it's not going to cause them any problem. And it's also due to their lack of understanding that there can be a downside to gambling. So what they see is the chance to win, and they don't focus as much on the likelihood that they might lose. What might be surprising to people is that the brain doesn't finish developing until the age of 25. So in adolescence, it's a period where there's a lot of brain maturation going on. Although it was once believed that brain development was complete during childhood, it's actually still developing until the age of 25. So an adolescent is less likely to make the decisions that go along with gambling than an adult might be. So does normal brain development contribute to adolescent susceptibility to gambling? There's greater risk taking, particularly in groups. So when youth are in a group, they might encourage each other to make a decision that's risky. One might make the decision, and then that might influence the others in the group to make the same decision that could be, risky for them as well. They have a greater propensity toward low effort, high excitement activities. So if they can find an activity that they can put little effort into and have something really great as a possibility, as a possible consequence, then that's very attractive to an adolescent. And they have a lower capacity for good judgment and weighing consequences, which I mentioned. They have a greater sensitivity to novel stimuli, so trying out new things, it's all part of their developmental stage. And something like gambling could be very attractive to them because it looks like fun. And again, it's something that's normalized in our society, so kids might not realize the bad that could come of it, but at first glance, it looks like it could be a lot of fun. So these are the forms of gambling associated with problem gambling in New York State youth. Playing cards for money, playing lottery or scratch-off games, which we mentioned is a pretty common thing and might seem harmless. I have a cousin who comes from California for Christmas every year and brings every single person in the family a scratch-off ticket because that's a whole lot easier to carry on an airplane than gifts. And this includes all of the small children all the way up to, all the adolescents in the family and everything. So it's something, it's like a fun thing and everyone laughs, and for people that don't have a problem with gambling, that can be a fun few minutes. And some people win every year because it's a big family, so chances are someone's going to win something. But if there was someone in the family who was at risk or is already having a problem with gambling, this could be, not such a great situation. Another form of gambling is playing pool, basketball, or other games of skill for money. Betting on sports for money could be on a small scale. For instance, every winter, a lot of places have a Super Bowl pool in offices and workplaces, and it's, just again, part of society. It's an accepted thing. It's fun. Everyone enjoys it. Somebody wins. There's a payoff for some, and it's a small risk for most people. But just doing any kind of gambling behavior can then lead someone who's starting to develop a gambling problem to do something more risky because now, I just won this, $2,000. Maybe I'll move on to something else and I can win even more. And then there are places like OTB where people go and gamble on a maybe a bigger scale, and it's easier for them to get carried away than with something like a Super Bowl pool. And then playing dice for money is another form of gambling. So reports show students that reported gambling were over 50% more likely to drink alcohol. The same thought processes go along with making a decision to do any risky behavior. But if someone is already someone who has experienced gambling as a student, they're 50% more likely to drink alcohol as well. They're more than twice as likely to binge drink. They're more than 3 times as likely to use marijuana, and they're 3 times as likely to use other illegal drugs. Almost 3 times as likely to get in trouble with the police, and almost 3 times as likely to steal or shoplift. And those 2 things could obviously be linked. So it makes sense that someone who has developed a gambling problem would then maybe have financial implications along with it, which sometimes might lead them to steal or shoplift. Or as we saw in the video, the woman ended up selling valuable belongings and things that, you know, presumably would have some sentimental value to her as well, because she started to develop money problems because of her gambling. College age youth, that's another risk, high risk group. So the statistics and risk involved are similar as that for adolescents. What makes them at even more risk though is that they're older, they get less supervision, and most likely more access to gambling activities. In New York, the age for legally gambling is 18. If they're in a casino where alcohol is sold, then the legal age is 21. So some students might be under 21. Unfortunately, they might have a fake ID to get into one of these casinos, or there might be a casino that does not sell alcohol, in which case an 18-year-old would be allowed to legally gamble there. Sometimes at schools, kids might have, like away at college schools, kids might have poker tournaments. Online gambling is a big problem, and it's too early to have seen any studies or anything, but the fact that we're now all spending so much time at home, and a lot of people were unemployed during this pandemic, it'll be interesting to see if online gambling issues have increased during this time, because people had a lot more downtime. At the same time, people's incomes were greatly impacted by this pandemic, which, you know, could further complicate if people are doing more online gambling. But at colleges, sometimes school and Greek sponsorship of Texas Hold'em or casino nights might happen. If there's casino nearby, groups could have, you know, rent a bus and take a group trip to a casino and so forth. So this quote, "In college you live wired, the number of hands you can play, the amount of thinking and studying you can do about those hands, everything's accelerated." So a student that's in college, everything they're doing is maybe more intense, and so they might do more risky things with gambling than they might have if they were not at that stage in their life. Students at the highest risk age, they think they're smarter than anyone else, and they're invulnerable. Okay, so the other at-risk group is aging adults, like the woman that we saw in the video. They're affected by environmental factors that are different from those experienced by youth. Due to their stage in life and emotional factors, they're often primed to develop a problem. As we saw in the video, the woman was feeling lonely, having lost her husband. That's part of aging, that often the people that are closest to them might not be with us anymore. Often people are retired and maybe have more free time and are looking for more recreational activities. And they face similar and different consequences than other populations. If you think about what the natural process of aging, usually as people get older, they might be less mobile. And so a trip from a senior center or a church, going to a casino or bingo nights or other forms of gambling are good options, in that there's not a lot of physical activity necessary in order to participate. So sometimes that's an attractive thing for someone if maybe they're, you know, limited in their mobility. They're not able to walk long distances. They're not able to stand a long time. Maybe they're using a wheelchair for mobility. Those sort of activities are something that they can do from a chair. Many seniors have more disposable income. Hopefully, if they've, you know, planned and saved, and maybe their expenses are less than they used to be because they're not raising children anymore. If they were raising children and they're, you know, maybe not doing as much, and maybe they've learned to be good with their money, but they often have more disposable income than their younger counterparts. So they might feel as though they have more money to burn, let's say. And there are other seniors that might have limited financial resources because they're not able to work anymore, so they have less money coming in maybe from their retirement, and they're looking for a big win to compensate. Often with people that are getting involved with gambling and it becomes a problem, it's because if they win a little, then they see it as a way to make up for whatever financial shortcomings. I have another story. A friend in college had a friend from home who was a little short on his tuition for college, went to a casino figuring he was going to make up the difference, lost all of it and had to drop out of college for that year. So it's something that whatever stage of life somebody's in, if they see gambling as a way to possibly make up for a shortfall in their income, it could work, but it's more likely to not work, which can have huge impacts on their lives. Many seniors are retired and have lots of time on their hands. They're looking for social interaction. So if maybe a lot of the people that were closest to them might not be around anymore, and maybe their family members that are younger are a little busier, going to a casino or a bingo night or something of that nature might seem like a great way for them to interact with other people. And it's an opportunity that they don't have in other parts of their life. For many aging people, the perception is that they deserve to have some fun now. So I've saved my whole life, I've worked hard, now I have free time, I'm gonna go and have fun. Gambling can be a way to experience that fun, as well as foster a sense of independence. They're making the decisions themselves, where someone who's older might be in the situation where someone else in their family is helping them make decisions. And this can be a way for them to maybe have a little bit more independence and feel like they're deciding things for themselves. And gambling can be a form of emotional escape. As we saw in the video, the woman, is having trouble managing her emotions related to having lost her husband. And this was an escape. And that could be the case for a younger person as well. So when gambling becomes a problem for someone and it's not just a recreational activity anymore, there are things that happen that greatly impact the quality of their life. They're likely to experience mood swings, which then could cause them to have problems getting along with their loved ones. They might eat less or be willing to go without food completely, go without medications that are necessary, household supplies, etc., to have money to gamble. So they're putting all of the things that are actual basic needs on a back burner because they want to use their money for gambling. People have cashed in on insurance policies, spending retirement funds, college savings, etc., which could then, have a huge impact on their life. And that also can impact the relationship they have with their loved ones. Let's say someone is married and makes one of those big decisions without consulting their spouse. That can have obvious ramifications for them and for their family. When someone in a family is having trouble with problem gambling, it can start to develop a lack of trust. So say back in the video that we watched, that daughter is going to have a hard time trusting her mom. It's obvious that the grandma loves the child, but because the mom of the child has now seen that the grandma put him in a risky situation, she's going to be less likely to trust her mom with caring for her son, which then is going to cause her more emotional stress because she, clearly enjoys being with him. It can cause financial difficulties for the whole family, as we said. When there's concern over the person who's having a problem gambling, over their physical well-being because they're not taking care of themselves, because maybe, like we said, they're not using their money for their basic necessities and they're using it for gambling instead. It can be very stressful for the other people in the family who are always anticipating that person is volatile and that they could lose their temper at any moment, that problems could erupt at any moment. It's a very stressful situation for the family. It's hard for people that do not have a problem with gambling to understand the decisions that the person with the problem with gambling is making, and that can be very frustrating for the rest of the family, that they just can't understand why this person can't stop, and they're frustrated that they're facing consequences of that person's decisions along with that person. And it can cause anxiety and depression for the individual as well as the other people in the family. So the impact of gambling on communities. 20% of addicted gamblers have filed for bankruptcy. 20% of the homeless are gambling addicts. That was very telling, I thought. 60% of those addicted to gambling will commit crimes. Again, if you have gambled away all of your money and you don't have money for basic necessities, or, you know, well, as well as you don't have money to continue gambling, it might lead you down the path of making bad decisions and committing crimes. Up to 50% of spouses of addicted gamblers are abused. So along with the problem gambling, the person is more likely to have trouble managing their anger and their frustration and anxiety and everything related to the gambling. And unfortunately, up to 50% of the time, they take it out on their spouse. When casinos opened in South Dakota, child abuse rose by 42%, along the same lines that I was saying. So the child in the family might be abused for the same reason, because the parent is having difficulty managing their anger and their emotions. 20% of gambling addicts commit or attempt suicide. So there's a great feeling of hopelessness involved in, let's take the woman again in the video. Had her daughter not noticed, and had she continued to engage in these risky behaviors, she could have caused herself even more financial problems, and then maybe she might lose her place where she's living. She might not have money to take medication, so she might be feeling sick. You know, there are a lot of things that tie into it, but that feeling of hopelessness is common because there are such serious consequences on somebody's life when they've gotten involved in problem gambling. The cost of problem and pathological gambling does not only affect individuals and their families, but society also bears the brunt of gambling, with the overall cost to taxpayers estimated at $56,000 for each problem gambler, including cost of treatment, health-related costs, absenteeism at work, and time spent in courts. So what are the warning signs that someone has gone from just gambling recreationally to having a problem with gambling? For one, spending more time on gambling activities and then presumably less time on the other parts of their life. They continue to gamble despite consequences. So for someone who doesn't have a problem with gambling, if you go to a casino and you decide, I'm going to spend $40, you gamble the $40, you've lost it. Someone who doesn't have a problem with gambling would say, okay, I'm done, that was fun. Oh well, I didn't win. For someone that has a problem, they're going to continue and maybe try to make up that money, but also to look for like that high feeling of having won. Someone with problem gambling, they're preoccupied with gambling. So maybe while they're spending time with their family or doing things that they normally like to do, in the back of their mind, all they're thinking is, when can I gamble again? If it's a student or if it's someone who is still working, their grades are likely to drop and their performance at work is likely to suffer as well. I mentioned people might get into stealing money to gamble, or stealing items and selling them in order to have money to gamble. And the time spent gambling interrupts previous engaged activities. So someone made commitments to other people, either socially or work related, and they're breaking their commitments because they've chosen to gamble instead. So what can you do to help prevent adolescent problem gambling? If you're involved with a school, incorporating gambling lessons in already existing prevention programs, analyze gifts, prizes, and events to ensure they do not promote a pro-gambling message, help parents and schools create policies about gambling, raise awareness that gambling can be problematic, challenge youth misconceptions about gambling and the odds, educate youth about the potential dangers, and inform youth about how to get help. With any segment of the population, education and prevention can go a long way. Letting people know, you're in a high-risk age group for problem gambling, and these are the things that could happen that could help. And then educating people about how to recognize when a loved one is starting to develop problems with gambling, so that maybe they can help the person get help and stop it before things have become really bad and before there have been serious consequences. This last slide has some information on where someone can get help if they are starting to develop problems with gambling. The New York Council on Problem Gambling, the New York State Office of Alcoholism and Substance Abuse Services, and Gamblers Anonymous are all resources that you could refer someone to use if you do know someone that is developing problems with gambling. And then last but not least, if anyone has any questions, you could use the chat box to ask any questions. We'll wait just a minute and see if anyone has any.
Jody, I just wanted to mention that in this area, the best Gamblers Anonymous programs seem to be in Rockland County. So if anybody is looking to refer, that's where there's pretty good groups right now.
Great, thank you. All right, well, that's just about it. Nobody has any questions. Thank you to everyone for attending, and I hope it was interesting and could be useful if anyone ever finds themselves in a situation where they know someone starting to develop these problems. And have a great day.